Mark, an IT specialist, and his wife Jessica, a Navy lieutenant, found their dream home, a charming colonial in a well-maintained neighborhood with good schools for their two children. Initially, the Homeowners Association HOA seemed reasonable with basic rules to maintain property values, as assured by their realtor. However, their peaceful life began to unravel when Jessica received orders for a 6-month deployment. Just 2 weeks after she shipped out, Mark started receiving a barrage of unreasonable violation notices from the HOA. Their grass was half an inch too tall, their trash bins were left out too long. Even their kids' previously approved basketball hoop was suddenly non-regulation. The American flag on their porch was improperly displayed, and the flowers Jessica had planted were deemed unauthorized vegetation. Mark tried reasoning with Karen, the HOA president, explaining he was solo parenting while his wife served overseas, but she coldly replied, "Rules are rules. We don't make exceptions." Mark realized they were being singled out when he noticed other homes with identical violations that were ignored. The situation escalated when the HOA began fining them $100 per day for ongoing violations, including ridiculous items like excessive foot traffic, his kids playing in their own yard, improper window coverings, and his father-in-law's truck being an unauthorized vehicle during a visit to help with the children. Within weeks, they claimed Mark owed over $2,000. Mark contested each violation, providing photos of identical situations at board members' homes, but his appeals were refused without explanation. Then the HOA escalated further, sending a letter stating their non-compliance and confrontational attitude constituted a significant disturbance to community harmony. They initiated proceedings to place a lien on their home and force its sale for bylaw violations. Mark was devastated. They weren't just harassing them, they were trying to take their home while his wife was serving the country halfway across the world. This wasn't just about rules or fines anymore. It was about their home, the one they had stretched their finances to afford, where their kids finally had stability after 3 military moves. They had poured $30,000 into renovations, and their savings were tied up in the house. Housing prices had skyrocketed, meaning a forced sale would leave them unable to afford anything comparable in the same school district. Their son had finally found a therapist, and their daughter had made the soccer team. Mark was crushed by the stress, losing weight and sleep. He tried everything to appease the HOA, hiring professional landscapers, repainting perfect trim, removing the basketball hoop. He documented every change with timestamped photos and submitted formal responses. He even attended monthly HOA meetings with a folder of evidence. But Karen cut him off after 30 seconds, despite letting others speak for 5 minutes. Later, Mark overheard a board member, Doug, say, "Military families don't belong here. Always coming and going, never committed to the community." Mark's neighbor, Steve, confirmed the HOA had targeted families before manufacturing violations until they left, as nobody fights back because legal fees would cost more than moving. Mark realized playing nice wasn't working. If they wanted a fight, they'd pick the wrong military family. 3 days later, Mark found an official envelope taped to their door. It contained a formal notice of covenant enforcement action with the HOA's embossed seal. Due to continued violations and outstanding fines now totaling $3,350, the association was exercising its right to begin eviction proceedings. They had 30 days to vacate or face legal action and additional penalties. A final hearing was scheduled, conveniently timed during Jessica's deployment, where they would vote on the eviction. The letter included photos of their home with circles around barely visible violations, like a garden hose not fully wound or a child's bicycle visible from the street. The same day, a process server delivered papers for a lien on their home. The HOA had already filed it with the county. Karen had gone nuclear. That night, Mark couldn't sleep. At 3:00 a.m., desperate, he began researching HOA laws. and founded the Service Members Civil Relief Act, SCRA. The SCRA provides protections for active duty military members and their families, including safeguards against eviction and foreclosure during deployment. What the HOA was doing wasn't just cruel, it was potentially illegal under federal law. He dug deeper and discovered more HOAs must follow their own bylaws and apply rules uniformly. He drove around taking pictures of other homes with the same violations they were cited for, including Karen's own property with its unapproved garden statue and non-regulation mailbox. Then he found the smoking gun. In their closing documents, the HOA's own covenant stated they couldn't initiate foreclosure actions against deployed service members' families. For the first time in months, Mark felt hope. The HOA hadn't just picked the wrong family to harass. They'd chosen someone protected by federal law. Mark contacted the Navy's Legal Assistance Office. The JAG officer he spoke with was furious. "They're doing what while your wife is deployed. Oh, we're going to shut this down fast." She emailed him information about the SCRA and housing discrimination against military families, along with a formal letter stating the HOA's actions were potentially violating federal law. Mark gathered every violation notice, email, and photo of their compliant property alongside identical violations the HOA ignored at other homes. During Jessica's next secure call, Mark explained everything. "I'm coming home," she said, immediately explaining she had emergency family leave available. "But your deployment," Mark began. "Mark, they're trying to take our home. My commander already approved it," when I explained, Jessica interjected. "I land 2 hours before that final HOA meeting." Her voice took on the steel Mark had heard in difficult missions. "They have no idea who they're messing with. I'm bringing my uniform." The day of the hearing arrived. Jessica's flight was delayed, making their timing dangerously close. Mark paced their living room, reviewing their evidence, the SCRA documentation photos of other homes with identical violations, and the HOA's own bylaws contradicting their actions. Their doorbell rang 3 hours before the meeting. Jessica stood there in her travel uniform, exhaustion visible from the 30-hour journey, but her eyes burned with determination. "Fill me in completely," she said after hugging the kids and Mark. Mark showed her everything, and she read through the JAG officer's notes, making her own annotations. "They picked the wrong family," she said, her voice calm but resolute. "I've defended our country. I can defend our home." As they prepared to leave, she opened her garment bag and removed her pressed dress blues, the gold insignia catching the light. "Tonight," she said, "they learn what real authority looks like." The HOA meeting was held in the community center, a room Mark had avoided for months. As he walked in, conversation stopped. 30 neighbors turned to stare while the 5 board members watched from their elevated table at the front. Karen smiled thinly. "Mark, we've allocated 5 minutes for your case before the vote. Just 5 minutes to defend their home." Mark took his seat alone as Jessica had insisted on arriving separately, knowing timing was everything. After rushing through regular business, Karen called Mark's name with barely concealed satisfaction. "We're addressing the ongoing violations at 742 Oakwood Drive. The board has documented 27 violations over 4 months, with fines totaling $3,750. She displayed photos of their violations on a projector screen. "As these remain uncorrected, we'll be voting on covenant enforcement action requiring the property to be vacated." When Mark tried to speak, Doug cut him off. "The time for explanations was months ago. This is simply a formality before our vote." The board members nodded to each other, clearly believing it was already over. Mark was mid-sentence in his defense when the community center doors opened. Every head turned. Jessica stood in the doorway in her full navy dress, blue service medals gleaming across her chest, the gold lieutenant bars on her shoulders catching the light. The room fell completely silent. Her posture was parade ground perfect as she walked purposefully to the front, her uniform shoes clicking sharply on the tile floor. Karen's mouth literally dropped open. Doug shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The neighbors in attendance straightened instinctively. Something about a military uniform in full dress commands respect. Jessica placed her service cap on the table facing the board and stood beside Mark Ramrod straight. Lieutenant Jessica Mitchell, United States Navy. I've just returned from deployment in the Persian Gulf to address this matter personally. Her voice carried the quiet authority of someone used to commanding sailors. Before you vote to evict a military family during active deployment, I'd like to explain exactly which federal laws you're about to violate. The Service Members Civil Relief Act specifically prohibits eviction of military families during deployment without a court order, Jessica explained, placing a document on the table. Furthermore, your own HOA Covenant Section 14. 3 states that foreclosure actions cannot be initiated against families of deployed service members. She opened their evidence folder, laying out photos of other homes with the same violations they'd been cited for. These selective enforcement patterns constitute discrimination against a protected class under federal law. The board members exchanged panicked glances as Jessica continued. I've consulted with Navy JAG. They're prepared to file federal charges for SCRA violations. That's up to $110,000 in fines per violation and possible criminal penalties. Karen's face had gone from red to ghostly white. Additionally, Jessica concluded, our attorney will file a civil suit for discriminatory housing practices unless all fines are dismissed immediately and written assurance provided that this harassment will cease. The silence that followed was deafening. Karen whispered something to their attorney, who looked increasingly alarmed. After a tense minute, their lawyer cleared his throat. The board needs to convene in private. They disappeared into a side room for 20 minutes while neighbors approached Mark and Jessica, many apologizing for not speaking up sooner. We had no idea they were targeting a military family, one elderly resident said, squeezing Jessica's hand. When the board returned, their demeanor had completely changed. We're dismissing all fines and violations, Karen announced stiffly, and postponing any enforcement actions indefinitely, their attorney added hastily. The board sincerely regrets any misunderstanding regarding your property status. But it didn't end there. Within a week, they received a formal apology letter. 3 board members, including Karen, resigned abruptly. The county opened an investigation into the HOA's financial practices after other residents came forward with similar stories. That was 2 years ago. Jessica completed her deployment and has since been promoted. They still live in the same house now, with a new HOA board that includes 2 military veterans who ensure rules are applied fairly. The previous board's selective enforcement became a case study for HOA management companies across the state. The day after the meeting, neighbors organized a welcome home barbecue for Jessica. Many admitted they'd been afraid to challenge the old board's tactics. You showed us all how to stand up to bullies, their next-door neighbor told them. They later discovered 3 other military families had been forced out before them. With help from the Navy's legal team, they received settlements for their moving costs and financial losses. Sometimes standing your ground isn't just about protecting your own home. It's about ensuring others won't face the same injustice. There's power in knowing your rights and having the courage to defend them, especially when you're fighting for your family.